Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review of Better Call Saul Season 4, Episode 6, Piñata. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Better Call Saul, so I start with a spoiler warning for Better Call Saul up to Season 4, Episode 6. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. So, this episode was a good one. I really enjoyed this episode. I went away after it ended having that feeling of just watching after watching something really good. Now, I wouldn't say this episode was like amazing or one of the best of the season or of the show's ever done or anything like that, but it was really good. It was a really strong episode that has me very optimistic about the season of Better Call Saul being the best season yet. Because I think they are setting up for even bigger and better things to come. But the episode in itself was really enjoyable. Okay, so let's start and let's jump into it. So let's start with the Jimmy and Kim stuff. Now, seeing the stuff with them alone in their apartment, it's kind of this. I cannot praise this show enough. As being so good, so realistic of showing what a dying relationship is like. And I wonder if everyone else is catching this too, because that's part of what I like. It's not in your face. It's not like showing them arguing with each other, but showing the cold distance that's growing between Jimmy and Kim. And I love that the relationship is dying in that way, not in yell at each other, don't like each other anymore, can't get along sort of way, but in the way that they're drifting apart. This is like a classic sort of drifting apart moment where they're both becoming sort of cold and non-feeling, and they both are dealing with their own separate issues, as I've been talking about, mostly springing from Chuck's death, but it springs them in different ways. Like, you know, and speaking of Chuck, the opening scene we got, which was a flashback that showed Jimmy and Kim in the mailroom, that was really great too, because that actually gave me some information I didn't know before, because it showed that Kim actually looked up to Chuck as a great lawyer. That's not, I mean, they might have mentioned this before, maybe I forgot, but it's not something they dwelled on too much. Mostly I thought Kim's relationship with Chuck was mostly because he was Jimmy's brother, but this scene illustrated that it wasn't simply that she looked up to him as a great lawyer. So it explains more of her guilt over being part of sabotaging him that led to his suicide, and how much that would devastate her, because she actually used to look up to him as a great lawyer. And also it was interesting that they said it, Jimmy was doing the Oscar poll, and they mentioned movies like Howard's End and Scent of a Woman, and so that actually set the date in 1993, because that's when those movies were nominated for the Oscars. Those movies came out in 92, but the Oscars were in March of 93, so it set it all the way back to 93, which I didn't realize that the Jimmy in the mailroom stuff was from that long ago, because you got to think the show currently, I believe, is set in 2002, although they could have jumped forward to 2003. I'm not sure of the passage of time, but it was basically 9 years ago that this 9 years from the present time of the show, 2002, that this mailroom stuff is taking place, which I didn't realize it was that long ago. And it's also interesting that both people who were betting in the Oscar poll voted for movies that didn't win that year, because Unforgiven won that year. I don't know if that was done as a little, inside slide or whatever, but I thought that was cool too. But anyway, so we jump forward to the Jimmy and Kim stuff, and you see what Kim's up to, which is kind of interesting, because last week I was wondering, because it seemed like she wanted to do the public defender work more. She's more interested in doing that now than she was the Mercer Verde stuff. But she had the opportunity to quit Mercer Verde, but she didn't. But here in this episode, they kind of explain it, and they bring back that sleazy lawyer guy, which is great seeing him. I think he's been in the show since season 1, and who had offered Kim a job previously, but she goes to him and asked for a job and asked to be start up a banking department at his firm, and you find out her motivation for doing so is that way she can have a whole team working on the Mercer Verde stuff, so she doesn't have to shoulder all the responsibility anymore, and so that will give her leeway to go and do the public defender stuff on her free time, because she would have more free time because she'd have other people to deal with the Mercer. So, and I think Jimmy put it best when she was explaining this to him, that she can have her cake and eat it too. Which is interesting. It's also, we had this set up earlier where, Jimmy, we got last episode, he's saying, I'm going to start a, joint practice with my partner. We're going to go into law. And we saw him doing the doodles of the McGill and Westclair. Like, he was really into that. And Kim glanced at that. So you think that, she was sort of inviting him to lunch and saying, oh, this is good news. But I kind of get the impression that she knew that he wouldn't react to it very well. And maybe that's why she was doing it this way, to try to soften the blow, because she saw the doodle. She knows that he was really, really invested in them doing their partnership together. And it was a really cool scene. I like the scene where Jimmy went and he stood by the kitchen. He was breathing heavily. And he was totally freaked out, but he went back, calmed down, sat down, and was like, yes, you should do it. It actually speaks to Jimmy's character, too. I think he knew that he wasn't going to win this one, and that if he insisted that they partner together, that would just anger her, and they would fight, and they wouldn't get along. So he knew, even though you could tell he was really hurt by that, and that he really wanted to do it, that, he was able to just sit down and be supportive. But now you might say, oh, so it shows that the relationship is fixed, or at least is on the right track to healing. I still don't think that's the case. I mean, yes, that was good for Jimmy. They didn't get into an all-out fight or, him trying to placate her. But I still think it shows that they're drifting apart, and I think he's realizing that. But I love how, I think this incident, more than anything, has sort of pushed him to wanting to go his own direction and do his own thing with the cell phones and the shady things, which is really interesting. And then we get the scene where he goes to HHM for money from Howard, and I love the scene. I love the scene with Jimmy and Howard. And I think by this point, at the start of the episode, Jimmy was still a bit fractured, and they had that confrontation about not wanting to see a psychiatrist. And I think Jimmy was still, he was hurt the last episode because those kids jumped him, so he felt like he was really out of it. So I'm trying to say, at the start of the episode, he was really in a bad place. But I get by the time that he had realized that the Wexler thing wasn't going to happen, that Kim was going to go her own direction, and he was going to do his own thing. I think he actually pulled himself out of it and was ready to go forward doing his own thing, and so felt more confident in that and was sort of more upbeat. And I think you really see that in the scene with Howard, because he goes to get his check because he's going to use it to pull off his thing. So he's all for going in the right direction, he's feeling good, he knows what he's going to do. And so he sees that Howard's falling apart still, the HHM is falling apart, and I love the little pep talk he gives to Howard. And I love that he could have just left it alone and be like, okay, whatever, Howard, you do your own thing. But he's like, no, this is bullshit. You have this huge firm. I don't want to see it fall apart like this. So, and I love how he's really straight with him too. He's like, Howard, you're a shit lawyer, but you're a good salesman, so go out and sell. And Howard's just like, fuck you, Jimmy. And he's like, there you go. Use that. That was amazing. I love that. I love how he wasn't just didn't get offended by Howard saying fuck you. He's just like, go out there and do it. And it does make me wonder if that is going to push Howard to go out in the right direction and turn things around for HHM. I don't know. We'll see. It's also curious. I also have to mention the scene, of course, that happened before this, where he found out the old lady he used to tend to, who was in this commercials, passed away. And that's another thing that sort of pushed him in a direction to do more, because he went back and watched a commercial he did with her, and I think he was very proud of that. And that's something that's more of the direction he wanted to be doing, more of that kind of thing, and it kind of reminded him of that. And also the fact that he referred, the relative to HHM, and said it was, Hamlin McGill, and the guy's like, "Oh, McGill, that's you, isn't it?" He's like, "No relation." So that was a big clue on why I think he goes by Saul Goodman, because I think once his PPD whatever is up, that he is totally going to go by Saul Goodman. And I think this is a huge indication of that, is he doesn't want to be associated with that anymore. And I don't think it's because HHM is kind of going to shit, but he doesn't want to be associated with his dead brother, who he helped disgrace, who was a dick to him the whole time and basically never supported him. I think he just wants no association with that whatsoever, which kind of is in contrast to how it was in season 1, where season 1 he was trying to be like his brother. He got that suit to look exactly like Hamlin, where now he doesn't want to be that anymore. He sees that as a bad thing to be, because he sees that it ruins him, and Chuck turned out to be a jealous dick. So I think he wants nothing to do with that, which is why I think he wants to distance himself from the McGill name, which is what started here. So obviously he's not going to want to use that name going forward, because he doesn't want to be associated with his brother. Which I like. It's very indicated. Anyway, also gotta talk about the whole thing with going to, setting up the thing with the piñatas with the the 3 punk kids that beat him up in the last episode. Because when I saw the last week's episode, I was wondering if we were going to see Jimmy go out there and try to get revenge on these punk kids, or if he was just going to leave it alone. But again, you can see how affected he was by the fact that back in the day, kids would know not to fuck with him, and they would know that he's just not some rube. So I love that he comes up with a scheme to get back at them, and basically, and of course he also says, tell all your friends. So he doesn't want to be that rube anymore that can just get beat up. He wants to go back to the time where people knew not to fuck with him, and sort of establish a name for himself. And of course we see, and when he goes to the kids, I actually bought it at first that he was trying to set up a deal where they get a certain amount of money, kind of like a protection racket, although he was suggesting it. But of course, I think he knew that the kids would be too stupid to take it. I actually didn't realize that, but as soon as he started running away and the kids were following him, it clicked. Like, as soon as that happened, I knew that the whole thing was a setup. That Jimmy wasn't just going to get his ass kicked again. I knew that he went there on purpose. I knew that he wanted them to follow him so they could set a trap. And it was so great when he went into the corner and the kids were like, "Oh, you're such an idiot." And he's just like, "You should have taken a deal." And the 2 huge guys creep up on them with guns, and they're just like, "Oh shit." And the whole scene with the piñatas, where they're hitting piñatas with the baseball bat, and he was sort of bullying the kids. That was brilliant. That was like, I think this is really showing the direction. This is really showing that Jimmy, this is the stuff he loves, and this is what he wants to do. And it's interesting also because when he's talking to Kim earlier about how she wanted to get back into criminal law, and he says, "Yeah, that's what I want to do too." So we're really seeing the birth of Saul Goodman here, where he wants to be the kind who intimidates, who's in charge, who has a name for himself, who tricks people, who cons people, but also is a criminal lawyer. So I'm loving it. I think in that whole scene with the piñata, and of course we find out that one of the guys was Huel. I reckon, even with the mask on, I like, that's Huel. Like, as soon as they took the mask off. The other guy, I know I've seen him before. I'm pretty sure he's been in Breaking Bad before, but I can't place him at the moment. Okay, so I just had to add in an edit that I figured out who that guy is. That's actually the Man Mountain from season 1, the episode Pimento, where Mike goes to get the job from Price, and he's with 3 other guys. One is the dude from The Walking Dead, Simon from The Walking Dead, and he talks this shit to Mike, and Mike's like, "Oh, I don't need a gun," or whatever, and he ends up just hitting that, punching him out. And so this giant guy who they call like a Man Mountain just runs off because he's freaked out by Mike. That's the guy guy that Saul has scare them out. I love that, actually. I think that's amazing. And I hope they're not just saying that it's a different actor. I hope they're saying it is the same guy. Because we know that Saul probably got these guys through the vet, and the vet is the one who arranged the thing with Price anyway, so it was probably could arrange it through him, so it was the same guy. But I love the man Malin guy. It's hilarious. You know that he was sort of hired the guy. You heard him talking on the phone. It's like, piñatas, huh? So it was kind of their idea to do the piñatas to scare the shit out of them. That was great. Absolutely great way to end the episode. I cannot wait to see the direction Jimmy goes in next. Anyway, let's move over and talk about Mike. We get a scene where he tries to make peace with his daughter-in-law, which, of course, all went to shit a few episodes ago. And when he was, went to the meeting and alienated everyone. And I like how he's like, look, I'm not going to apologize for the guy. I was totally right. I got that guy. He's an idiot. He's a charlatan. He should have been called out. But that wasn't the way to do it. That was not the time and the place. And so that was his backhanded way of apologizing. And it could have gone one way or another, but you could see that she really did. At the very least, she needs his help, and she knows it. And she knows that she wants her daughter to have her grandfather in her life. So it was very tentative. But I think it also establishes that she's not going to be pushing for him to go to these groups and stuff like that anymore, because she now knows that it's not really for him, and she's going to let him grieve in his own way. So that was great, seeing that little reconnection. And also with Mike, we got the stuff with the Germans setting up. Now, this is really interesting because this is really showing Mike. This is like really building the Mike and Gus relationship, because it's first of all, the fact that Gus even knew that Mike was the right man for this particular job shows that he already was impressed by Mike. I guess the way he went into the companies as being a securities consultant and just like really kicking ass and knowing like every ins and outs. And then, of course, as I talked about the time when Gus threatened Mike could see through it and knew that it was just because he wanted Mike to do something. So I think that impressed him more. And so he was really entrusting Mike to do everything. And he was talking about, okay, we need to have this. We need an entertainment system. We need all this, because it's not good enough just to keep them alive. We need to keep them occupied and busy, so they're not wanting to climb the walls and, climb the walls and get into trouble or whatever. We need to keep them happy as well. And I think Mike was also very impressed by that. And this is the huge, Gus, was really impressed by that. So I think this is a huge building block of how Mike will become Gus's right-hand man, because I think he's just continuing to be more and more impressed by Mike. And I think Mike is caring a bit less about it being illegal or whatever, because he's kind of used to he's fed up with working within the system that got him nowhere, and I think he's just getting more and more used to working for basically a drug lord, and I think he's starting to care about that less and less. And it's also interesting, of course, when they meet the Germans, and there's this one guy in particular who's being a dick, and Mike, goes out and tells his security guys, keep an eye on that guy. I think that's obvious. That's a Chekhov's gun situation. That's just, the guy himself is the gun in this scenario. It's obvious they're not setting this up for no reason. This guy's going to be trouble in some way, and some way that Mike's going to deal with. I'm guessing that's a way that's going to impress Gus even more. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out as well. Also, speaking of Gus, I have to touch on the scene with Gus and Hector. Of course, when Gus tells the story about the animal that he trapped, that was a really creepy story, and it's obvious that, of course, it was a direct metaphor for Hector and how he feels about him. So it's interesting because we know, like, at this moment they think that Hector's not going to survive and he's never going to wake up again, but we know that he will. So I do wonder if that's just going to be a happy stance, or if Gus is going to find a way. He's going to be the one to save him. Either way, we do know that Gus does sort of keep him like a trapped animal for several years. We do know that he pretty much ruins his life and makes sure that he's alive to experience. So that's Really creepy scene. Love that scene. So my rating for Piñata out of 10 is a 9. Excellent. Really great, solid episode. Really enthused by this episode. Not the best episode ever, but it was just entertaining all the way through. It had great comedy, had great character moments, great character development, great setting up. This is probably the best episode so far, just in terms of pushing Jimmy forward to Saul Goodman, which in the whole Piñata thing, I still love that. I still love his encounter with Howard, where he just says, "You're a shit lawyer and you're a good salesman." And Howard's like, "Fuck you," and he's like, "Use that." Man, I love that. And Kim's finally seeing what she's up to, seeing that she's sort of having her cake and eat it too, and the whole thing with Mike dealing with the Germans. As I said, there are better episodes in the show, but it was a good, solid episode. Anyway, that is it for my review for Piñata. I will be back here every week with my review for Better Call Saul, so be sure to check that out. Also, check out my channel for many other videos and other shows like Star Trek, Game of Thrones, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.